Hello everyone, and welcome to Worlds TV. I think it's episode 24. I may have made a mistake. If I did, I'm so sorry. It's probably 24. As you can see, today I don't have my trusted Lee to my right or to my left. It's only gonna be me. We have Lee out on a very super special mission that she's gonna accomplish. She will be back though, so don't worry. But it does mean a couple of small changes. I'm not going to do any tech news. As I think you know, that's not really my strong side. I'm just gonna, say stuff and it's gonna be weird and it's probably gonna be hugely inaccurate. What I will do though is have an interview. And for those of you who saw last episode, you'll know that we actually have Paul Wilkinson here today. So that's super exciting for me. I know him very well. He's a good friend of mine. And also, he has been making games. He's a game maker that has been making games all the way since the Game Boy. Seriously, the Game Boy. We're talking the Game Boy. So it's a long time, a lot of experience. I can't wait to have him here. So I'm actually just gonna go ahead, press the little get him here type of button, and welcome Paul Wilkinson.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
There we go. Beautiful. Good to have you here, man.
Great to be here, Christian.
I'm happy to see you. And we are actually going to talk, I think we can just jump right into where I left off there. You have a really long history of making games.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into that to start with? How did that start?
Okay. So originally, I got started writing code in high school a little bit on the Apple II. I sort of dropped it. I got into other teenager things. Then when I went into university, I decided to do a computing degree. Back then, computing was nothing to do with games. Games existed. I decided to do it. But we sort of, people going to computing, we sort of got into it because we thought we were going to be able to have, we thought we were going to have fun writing code.
wait, so, okay, I'm going to have to dissect this a little bit. First of all, you said you did other stuff that actually sounded quite interesting. And then that sounded kind of like you were a cool kid, did some stuff. And then you went into code because you thought it would be fun and cool. And like when was this?
Yes, and boy was I wrong.
Boy was I wrong. How could you not have seen that? And so when was it? When was this? In what year?
This would be around 1983. 1983. I started I started going to university in '83.
Apparently, 1983 doing computer code was cool. I did not know that. Is that how you're phrasing it?
No, in 1983, it was applications were mostly about business. We didn't actually really know what computers did. So when we got a typical internship would be working for a company with a mainframe computer.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's me.
What are you doing?
Making noises here. Just getting into the chat and seeing it. We have Robert Mitchell. I remember Game Boy development, doing it as a university course, going from PS4 dev to Game Boy, really showed its restrictions.
Ah, okay. Yes, no index registers. That was fun.
Yeah. Sorry,
but writing games for the Game Boy was actually fun. Yes, very limited, but that's what made it fun. So small teams, simple art. You had a lot of control over the finished product.
So for those of you who don't know, I was born in 1985 and I played Game Boy, right? So I had a Game Boy. I think I was 5. That was like, I'm probably a little bit older, but that was like one of the few things I was able to have. My mom didn't want the TV. My dad had to kind of fight for the TV. Then he started just exploding with computers in the 90s because he was so much into that. But that's kind of interesting. What games were you working on? Is there any anything you remember from that period?
Sure. The one of the first games that I worked on was a Game Boy port of a game called Battle of Olympus, which was a port of a popular Japanese game, and that was that was a great game. We also worked on Wayne's World. We did an NES version of a Nintendo version of Wayne's World.
Oh.
We did a couple of Mario educational games. Most of the games that we did were licensed intellectual property. We didn't. It was pretty difficult to come up with your own game idea and just make a game. Typically, what happened was a publisher had bought some intellectual property to a film, so they bought the rights to release a game based on a film, and then they would hire a developer to write the game.
Ah, okay. And was this often kind of, back at that time, obviously Nintendo was kind of in charge of a lot of the stuff that was released. How involved were they in the games that were made for the platform?
Nintendo would approve games,
Okay.
but they would not, you would not talk to Nintendo until you were ready to release the game. This is I'm speaking as a developer. The publishers were separate companies. I don't really know how their relationship with Nintendo worked. You did need to be a licensed Nintendo developer, but that was relatively easy.
So in today's terms, it's a little bit similar to how Apple treats their App Store.
Yeah, more or less. A little bit more, a little bit more intense.
A little bit more intense.
Yeah.
I mean, could you even make nudes at like 4 pixels?
You can do a lot. 4 pixels?
With 4 pixels.
That sounds good.
Robert Mitchell says here, yeah, I must admit that I did love designing the sprites.
Mm-hmm. Ah, designing sprites. Cool.
Can I, okay, you're talking over my head. What's that even mean?
A sprite is a little picture that moves around on the screen.
What?
That's all it is.
So wait,
it's a picture that moves.
It's a picture that moves. Why do you call them a sprite?
Because sprites move.
Everything moves. This makes no sense to me.
Yeah,
okay,
I guess we could have called them cars.
You could have called them anything.
But they move around like, yeah, you're supposed to make them move like a little pixie or something.
Ah, okay.
I think that's where it came from.
Oh, okay. So it's often kind of like it's kind of creating ambience as well in the game, these things. You wouldn't call a character, it wouldn't be a sprite.
Yeah, a character is a sprite.
Oh, it is
anything
a sprite.
that moves.
Oh my god.
Anything that moved back then was a sprite.
Nice.
I don't. The reason that they're called sprites, I can only guess that the first person that made a moving
it was like probably
bitmap
5 pixels
image made it look like a sprite.
Oh, okay.
But that's just a guess.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. In all fairness, it's still better naming than astrophysics. You know, in astrophysics, that's really confusing stuff sometimes. So not too bad. Not too bad. And so moving on from that time. So what happened after this? So we're back way now in 1983.
Mm-hmm. So after the very early console games, we got into games for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, which here was called the Mega Drive, I think.
Yeah. Oh, the Sega Mega Drive.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what we used to play Sonic and Tails.
Okay.
Sonic 1 and 2, that was our like favorite games.
Okay.
And we used to call Tails we had our Swedish names for these characters, which were the English name, but we couldn't say Tails. We didn't even know what that meant. So we call them Tallis.
Nice.
Tallis, because it's kind of cute and it's like pine tree. I don't know. That's what we call them anyway.
Okay.
But I think a lot of people in my generation have some really, really specific... and actually, what I want to talk with you about...
I don't know why they called it the Mega Drive. I always thought that was just a terrible name. Genesis sounded good. Mega Drive, I mean, you might as well get an astrophysicist to name your console.
Yeah, that's true. But I gotta say, I think as a kid, and specifically a kid who's not American, probably English speaking, it kind of sounds cool. It has a ring to it. It's Sega Mega Drive. It's something mega. It's
Sega
really
Mega?
big. You know, we would just connect it as one word.
Okay.
And since it was still like Sega big on every game, you kind of got that it was not a combination word. It's like specifically for the drive. Mm-hmm. So I remember that didn't put me off as a kid though. It was rather the opposite. It was like, oh yeah, cool.
It was pretty mega at the time. You can make a sprite out of, you had 8 pixels.
It was. And I have to say, I want to go back a little bit to sound, because I know you're very interested in this, and you're actually, you actually said here, I have a little bit of some background information here. You said you design music as well, sound effects.
So for my first game, the Battle of Olympus, my first project under contract was actually writing a sound system that could play all the music that came with the original game.
Okay.
So I wrote a sound system. After I finished that, the company Radical Entertainment was happy with my work, and they told me that I could go on to writing a game. I told the guy, you know, what I'd really like to do is write all the music and the sound effects and write all the sound code. And he shrugged his shoulders and said, "Sure."
Whatever. You do you, man. How was the dudes back then that worked in this industry? You know, if you remember, like, were they really relaxed that way?
It was really weird because, like, they were actually normal people.
No way, man.
Yeah.
I was struggling every day. I was like, I got into code because it was the cool kids. And here I am with normal people.
It's like, what are these people doing here?
What's going on? Oh man, that's cool. But you said here it was in mono, and they didn't listen to your stuff.
Ah, yeah. I eventually got out of doing the music and sound effects for the games for a couple of reasons. First, one of them was that it was very, very unglamorous and not well respected. For the simple reason that when you're at work and everybody's working on a game, everybody turns the sound off for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it gets a little bit tedious.
We were actually working on a Rocky and Bullwinkle port once, and I debugged my sound system to the theme song for Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No.
It's a very, very catchy tune. I had to have the sound turned on.
Yeah. So they moved you to
the themes. They gave me my own office.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that from a friend. It's still really like that. They put the poor audio engineers in some back office, stuff it with some stuff, and they sit here, do your thing, do you,
yeah,
go away. Yeah. But that's really cool. And we're talking about what was Nintendo on stuff, like 8-bit sound. What were you doing back then?
Okay, so on the oh boy. The NES, the regular NES, wasn't really in bits. You had a square wave, you had a triangle wave, and a noise generator. You could play one note at a time on each. So you'd use the triangle wave for bass sounds, you'd use the square wave for lead sounds, clarinets, electric guitars, they're all square waves. And then the noise generator you would use for drums.
Are those initial ones still around? Like could you?
Sure.
Because I know
machines are still around.
Yeah, machines are.
Of course.
Like the environment is still around.
The development environment, I don't know. I have not seen an NES development environment for a long time. I can only guess that you could find out by looking online.
Yeah, well, thank you. Nobody's cool. I shouldn't be asking specific musical questions now, but I would love to have some of that stuff. Because I went back the other day, and it's not really the other day, but it means it's within a month. I went back and I found the original music for Sonic 1 and 2. And that's still today, it's amazingly good. And it's so nice. It's really fitting in with the retro wave and the synth wave that's happening now. It's amazingly good stuff that they put out. And I was always so impressed back then. Every game I played, you could tell that there was someone that cared about the music in the game. You know, there's very few games where they actually, you know, where it was just really I don't care. You know, they put in effort.
No, we cared about the music for sure.
Yeah.
I used to work all night just going over and over these songs. We used to simulate reverb just by turning the volume of the oscillators down almost all the way instead of turning them off.
Cool.
We had all these tricks. We'd simulate chords just by arpeggiating between notes really quickly. Yeah, it was fun. And of course, when a sound effect came along, that had to steal one of the music voices.
Yeah. So how many voices could you have at the same time there?
4.
4.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the NES. The Game Boy, it had 2 square waves as well. I think it had a noise generator, and then instead of a triangle wave, it had a programmable waveform generator where you could sort of not really draw in the waveforms, but you could poke in a bunch of numbers in hex and create a waveform that way.
Okay, that was cool. So jumping back a bit, sorry about that, digging into the musical stuff of everything, but that's really cool. So yeah, we went into Super Nintendo bit and Sega Genesis. Mm-hmm. You were at Sega Mega Drive there. Did you do anything? I'm calling it Mega Drive here because I love it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're
great name.
Slightly pissed. I advised against this, and still, because Sega has such an amazing history, a very, very interesting history on how they came to be and how they met their demise. Yeah, as at least a console player. So tell me more about that particular period, Nintendo. I guess it was the NES versus the Sega Mega Drive. This should have been like, what is it, 90, 91, 92, 93?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Is it wrong? It should be, right? Or
not so good with dates.
Okay,
sorry. Especially dates like that. I mean.
Yeah. Anyway, around 90s.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nailed it.
Finally, I get a date. I felt like I passed the test. That should have been like, what, the 70s? All right, so the 90s, yes. What happened in your life at that point?
At one point, we got a demo of the Super Nintendo pre-release. We had heard in advance that the hardware came with hardware bitmap rotation, and nobody knew what that meant. This is, of course, pre-internet, so you couldn't find sneak preview videos or anything. You had to actually work for somebody that got a development system that could.
You couldn't advise stupid fucks to just Google it themselves, right?
So we had no idea what this hardware bitmap rotation was, but it was very intriguing for us. And then when we saw the game, we would see Mario spinning, and we'd be like, I don't think that's it. And then when we finally saw F-Zero, and we could see what they could do with their hardware bitmap rotation, we were pretty blown away. It was pretty cool.
All right.
Felt like serious power.
And for those of us, including me, who do not know what this is, what happened there? What was the technological change?
Well, before the Super Nintendo, you could only really show images flat on the screen. But then with the hardware bitmap rotation, you could tilt them down and then and spin them, and then so basically you could make a racing game like Super Mario Kart.
Okay.
Or F-Zero.
All right, F-Zero.
Yeah.
Was that one of the games that?
Oh, you've never seen it?
No.
Yeah. Okay. It's it's one of the games.
All right.
But maybe Super Mario Kart is a better example.
So in that area, what games were you working on or involved in?
The first Super Nintendo game we worked on was a licensed product called Bebe's Kids, and that was released way after we finished developing it. So we finished it. It was not released. Then it got sold. Someone decided to release it, and then it went through Nintendo. Went through Nintendo of America and passed, and then it failed when it got to Nintendo of Japan. because I had because when the Nintendo logo showed up when you turned the console on, I had a sample of Martin Luther King saying "Too black, too strong," and so Nintendo of Japan rejected it because they felt that some users would be offended by
how was the
its racial
relationship
overtones.
between these two companies? Because I know in Sega it was definitely problematic. How was it in Nintendo in that time? I mean, was the US in a term, could they release this without repercussions from the, I mean, they could do whatever they want in their market, or would they still have to kind of report in terms of releasing stuff that could be controversial, such as this?
I don't really know. I can say that my feeling about Nintendo of America was that Nintendo of Japan was quite hands-off compared to some other Japanese publishers and developers. And then Nintendo of Japan, of course, is also held in very, very high regard. So when the Nintendo icons came to visit the U.S., it was a very, very big deal.
Wow. So you could probably say that even if there wasn't maybe some legally binding stuff, if they said something, then people just listened.
Nintendo is so highly respected in the industry that yes, people would just listen.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Yeah. Cool. So, but basically, this game got blocked then in Japan, but it could release in the US.
No, it has to get through Nintendo of Japan to release in the US.
All right. Okay.
It's normally just a formality. Usually, I don't know how typical it was for a game to be passed by Nintendo of America and then rejected by Nintendo of Japan. And it was only rejected for this one reason.
And then you fixed that? You removed it, or you just canceled the game? I won't stand for it. This is my creative freedom. I want to have Martin Luther King.
It was so long after we wrote the game that I couldn't remember how anything worked, actually. But I managed to change the sample so that it said... Luckily, I'd broken up the sample into two separate samples to save space, because there's some space between the too black and the too strong. And so I was actually able to change like one byte somewhere and have it say too strong, which is kind of lame. But
too strong, too strong?
Yeah.
Nice.
But we got it up. We got it out the door.
I'm gonna find this game. I'm gonna make some weird meme about this now. But that's cool. It should have been. That's a great slogan for Japan, though. I think too strong, too strong. That should have really worked. Good. Matthias Nord, if you're still here, man. Hello. Good to see you in the chat. Say, drop a line. Say a word. But awesome, man. That's really cool. So what happened after that? How long were you working with this particular, developing games for these sort of platforms, for Nintendo specifically, or the NES?
How long? How many years? 6?
6 years. So this would have been from the beginning of, again, just somewhere around 95, 96. That's when you kind of left that behind.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not that great with dates.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's like, I don't know why I'm so into dates today. It's like I think it's because I'm so connected to a lot of these
Pretty
games.
sure it was a Tuesday.
It was a Tuesday.
It was about 15:15.
I just decided it's time. It's summer, mid-90s. It's a Tuesday. It's about time. Super Nintendo side. We have so then come this. So this must have been when the CD-ROM came. This is how big of a transfer for the? I mean, obviously it was a big transfer for the industry. But how did you feel that, and what happened? You also have something about Sega Genesis here, and that again must have been on that Tuesday there.
Well, so what actually happened was there was some consolidation, and you really had to have quite a bit more skill as a company, as a developer, in order to get these contracts. We actually started focusing on sports games. This is all happening in Canada, in Vancouver. So we were all hockey players. So writing hockey games came kind of naturally for us.
Yeah.
So we had to write hockey games, we had to compete with Electronic Arts, which is not trivial.
No, still not trivial.
No, even to this day.
Even to this day.
So the teams got bigger, competition got more intense. The publishers got a lot smarter with their contracts. In the early days, the publishers didn't seem to know very much about game development. It also didn't seem to matter how good your game was, because when people bought games, since there was no internet and they didn't really advertise games on television, a lot of people would walk up to the counter in a toy store and just ask what a good game is and just buy whatever the salesperson handed them.
I think that's exactly what my dad used to do. Yeah. When he bought us like a Christmas gift game.
Yeah, we called it the random audience.
And I remember them so vividly. I remember computer game stores with these old boxes when they were still in actual boxes. It was special as a kid who grew up in that time and playing games playing so many games. That was like the holy grail to go into one of these stores and see all of the titles. I remember picking out Transport Tycoon Deluxe. Do you know this game? Mm-hmm. It is also one of the best sounds in the. It's some jazzy background music playing, and it's also created all computer coded. It's kind of interesting. It's a really cool game.
It was fun for us going into those stores because we could see boxes that we
had made.
Yes.
It's got to be special. I mean, obviously, I go in specifically creating such. Because I think there are certain things that you do that most people don't know how much effort goes into, and there are certain things that you can think, oh, that goes a lot of effort into that. But I think games are one of those things that and today is obviously different, but back then no one knew. Like you point out, like this was something that just kind of worked in a computer, and the kids could kind of play it, the value of it. And what was good and what was bad, like you're talking about, all around it must have been really kind of no one knew. No one knew how much hours anyone put in to make it.
Yeah, it was a much smaller industry back then. So nowadays, most people know a game developer or several game developers. But yeah, back then it was such a tiny industry that nobody. Yeah. I think most people did not know anybody who had a job in games. Yeah. And now. I mean, I know so many people that are working on mobile software. It's just sort of a given. I'm kind of surprised when people aren't.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, and as we've been seeing here too, today every single company have to work with software development in one form or another. So maybe at least outsource this to someone else. But it's really, really cool. So these were the really kind of early days of all of this. I'm gonna wait. We have PlayStation and Xbox. This is kind of when I left console gaming and went to all in on PC. So I'm a PC gamer mostly from that onwards.
Well, that's when I switched into PC games.
So it's gonna. Yeah, thank you so much. But let's stay with the Xbox and the PlayStation, because that was obviously huge. That must have had such an impact on the market. Just the CD, like we talked about. Can you remember the first time you played on a PlayStation? Like, how did that swap feel like?
The first time I played on a PlayStation. So the first game I played on a PlayStation was a Mario game. No, it wasn't.
It would have been cool. It would have been, you spent so much time porting Mario games to PlayStation.
No, I don't remember the first time. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, okay. But how did it affect you, and how did that affect the industry? I mean, you must have known about this a couple of years, or at least some time in advance that this was coming, and been asked to develop games, or knowing that this was happening within the industry. Because it must have changed how you could write and how you could create code for these. How you could create these games, essentially.
Yeah, it was quite different. There's a switch to having a lot more content and streamed content. So and in the early days, we would try putting video on the CD and
right.
things like that. It didn't actually turn out to be as revolutionary as we expected. The cartridges also got quite a bit bigger. And then also, of course, there were loading times, so they nobody wanted to wait for things to load. So a lot of the focus switched toward optimizing loading time and being careful how you loaded the content, and so the limitations sort of came back pretty quickly. In the early days, we didn't really care. So the early days, the games tended to load very slowly.
I'm just going to interrupt here really quick. Robert Mitchell says, the first home console I got was the original Xbox. I got it with Crash Bandicoot. Is that how you say it? I'm going to say it like
that. Crash Bandicoot.
If I said Bandicoot, I know I'm not wrong. And the Wrath of the Cortex. Amazing memories. That's exactly in that time period. And this is really when some parts of this really started to mature. How did you feel the industry changing, over these kind of what it must have been two or 3 years before, right before it was released and after it was released, and how the competition changed?
There's a lot of consolidation. So there tended to be more focus on Electronic Arts games, and the big developers started to win a much larger share of the market.
Yeah.
The random market sort of went away, and it was pretty hard became a lot more difficult to start your own development shop. The cost of entry got a lot higher.
Yeah.
We started doing motion capture, and the art pipelines and the relationship between the art and the technology got a lot more detailed, a lot more challenging.
And so just to kind of go back and forth now that we have some of the history, you've basically for a lot of your time in the industry, you've actually been competing with EA. Mm-hmm. They have been probably one of the really big brothers in the industry that was competing with you, specifically in sports games, but probably in quite a few other areas as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the point where the big kind of consolidation started. So, because I'm going to lead on to Maxis now with some form of very nice transfer. But so how did that happen? How did you get on Maxis and that team?
So I decided that I wanted to, in order to grow as a developer, I needed to leave Vancouver and move to the States. So move to the Valley. So I ended up at another developer in San Mateo. And then I was approached by Electronic Arts, who wanted me to come on with them. So then I started working on a SimCity game, and then jumped onto The Sims.
Okay, and this is so Maxis was essentially owned by Electronic Arts already.
Yes.
At that time.
Yep.
When did they get bought out?
Not so great with dates.
Yeah, sorry, it's my problem. But Maxis, would you say? God, I don't know why I'm terrorizing you with dates. Oh, whatever. So Maxis, because I
think it was a Tuesday.
It was probably a Tuesday morning, 8-ish. But how would you say, how was the culture at Maxis back then? And if you kind of compare it to it was in the really early days?
So the culture at Maxis was, it was pretty casual, and then we had a bunch of sort of like slightly hippie-ish geniuses in the company. So we did tend to work a lot of hours, but it was still sort of, it wasn't, in the early days the pressure wasn't as relentless as it got later on. Yeah, it sort of it definitely it did not feel like Electronic Arts. It felt like it was still Maxis.
All right. So they hadn't completely incorporated. Could you and if you because you must have at least spent some time with the EA people. Could you say something about? Was there a difference? Do you think there between the people working at EA at the time and the people working at, say, a smaller subcontracted studio like Maxis?
Well, so yeah, there was when you work at Electronic Arts, you feel like you are responsible for a smaller part of something that's going to be much bigger.
Mm.
Sort of everybody acts with a much bigger picture in mind than they would at a third-party developer.
Okay.
Because your job is to create a massive hit.
Yeah.
So Electronic Arts needs their games to be very big hits in order to be successful.
But so just to stay a little bit at Maxis, right? So they released SimCity. Which was the big hit that studio got off?
The first big hit was The Sims. I mean, sorry, the first big hit was SimCity.
Yeah. SimCity.
And then their massive hit was The Sims.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into The Sims. There's a couple of more games though that I remember playing that I'm pretty sure was. They made some roller coaster. Who made that?
Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Yeah.
No.
The first ones. Maybe I'm way off here.
There were a lot of sim. Most of the games started with Simcopter.
Oh right, there was a lot of them at the time.
There was also a game that they released called Sky Chase, which was a vector flight combat simulator, that was really fun.
Cool. Do you remember a game called Descent?
Yep.
That is, I'm so happy I finally found someone who knows what this game is, because it seems like it was kind of obscure. And I always thought that was one of the best games I ever played, because it was really fun to go in and blow up a mine.
Yeah.
Who made that game?
I don't know who made it.
Sorry, you shouldn't ask about this specific questions, but I'm just so excited if I Google, right?
I think they made it on a Tuesday.
They probably made it on Tuesday, and it was probably the Tuesday people that made it. Good, so let's get into Sims. This obviously is it's one of the most well-known games ever. It was huge, and I grew up, I think I can't remember, probably also on a Tuesday, but the people around me, especially it was the first time that I saw some of my girlfriends play a game and get excited about the game. It was definitely, I mean, you'd never see that. Down in the gaming halls, there used to be guys, and that was it. You know, if there was a computer, there was definitely a guy trying to break it. This was the first time I heard, not saw, because I think it was still kind of embarrassing to be seen playing computer games. So they wouldn't go to the public places where there was a lot of guys. They would sit, you know, hidden away on the mom's computer, or you know, where they could find. But they were talking about this game, and they were so invested in this game, and you know, it's really huge. So how did that start?
Well, when I joined Maxis, they were working on this sort of dollhouse simulator. This was Will Wright's pet project. I was still working on SimCity titles. It was about a 4-year project. I only came on in the last year. The idea was to design a house that would make your living dolls happy.
Yeah.
It looked really cool. It was fun editing houses. There wasn't much game there. We hired then one day we interviewed this guy named Patrick Barrett, who saw the game engine and just said, "You can make an incredible game with this thing."
Yeah.
But the focus needs to be on the people, not on the house.
Yeah. Because that's something that really blew me away when I finally got coaxed into actually playing the game. How far advanced it was in its graphics. Like how well it all looked, and how the 3D kind of engine was really beyond anything that I had seen before that. And I remember that. I was like, what? Why would they spend so much on that for a game like this? you know, like
right.
to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very early 3D because it was actually written for computers that did not have a graphics card. So it was written to work on a computer with no accelerated graphics at all. So yeah, it looks pretty cheesy now, but back then it was pretty amazing.
It was amazing. I remember getting pretty blown away. All right, so this guy came on and he wanted you to focus on, what was his name?
Patrick Barrett.
Patrick Barrett, and I'm sure a legendary figure. Because I'm bad with names. He's bad with dates. I'm bad with names. Don't blame me. Don't hate me, please. But he came on. He said, let's focus on the actual people. So how did that change the gameplay in the last year? You would say from where it was when you came in to where it was when it was released.
Well, it made the game was really very quickly. The game became really funny because it was really buggy, and we found that when we played the game and found these bugs, we couldn't help but laugh because they were real people doing
weird stuff,
silly things, like you know, and it would look like you can't look at a 3D model of a person moving around and without attributing some sort of intention to it.
Yeah.
And the bugs would be like, you know, oh, they're eating salad at the beginning of their meal, you know, so maybe. In the US, we thought that Europeans ate salad at the beginning of the meal for some reason. I don't think it's true.
I don't. You live there now. Is it true? I don't know. Do we eat salad at all? Who eats salad?
Well, yeah.
Well, I guess we do.
Nobody eats vegetables in Sweden, unless you count English cucumbers.
That's true. That's true. So, yeah, and that's one of the things that I found so fun. I used to play this with one of my good friends, Max, who you have met. We played this quite a lot because we liked the idea of building inverted houses. So we put the grass and everything inside and put the tiles and everything outside. And we invented these imaginary families that were all really psychedelic and wrong. And it was kind of fun to crash characters. I think that's kind of like they're slowly going more and more weird, and you know, like we don't really take care of them. But we had a lot of fun, and that took me. I was really bitten by this game as well. It was just really interesting to play. So, but this last year was a lot of bug fixing, essentially. A lot of these small quirks that you wanted to fix.
Well, there's always a lot of bug fixing.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when I'm around.
Yeah. And break stuff. Someone has to fix it.
But no, in the last a bit more than a year, it actually sort of became a game and got released. It became fun, and then we released it very quickly. Electronic Arts did not think the game was going to be successful.
No, and what happened there when it was released?
They released the game on black and white CDs in order to save printing costs because they thought that the CDs were all going to end up at the dump. Wow.
But was there marketing budget allocated to that? Nothing sizable, I suppose?
No, I don't think there was much of a marketing budget, but we were able to create a buzz. The development director at the time, Jim Macraz and Will Wright, were at CES, and they played a little trick where they would bend over and tie their shoes in front of the booth so that people wouldn't be able to get by. And so there seemed to be a lot of buzz around the booth, and so they managed to make sure that there was always a crowd around the booth.
Classic.
That way.
Classic show techniques here being exposed.
I don't know how it took off. I think there was a lot of word of mouth going on for that game because it was.
It's quite incredible the impact that game had. So what happened in the years to follow there? Well, maybe probably in the year to follow or the time after.
Well, after the Sims was released and became such a gigantic success.
How long time did that take before EA came to realize, oh man, we got a success on our hands?
Don't know.
Yeah, a Monday maybe. Or...
Don't know.
Yeah. But at some point, you should have gotten more money in the development team to make a sequel, right? And they must have, or they were like, no, you know.
No, they were like, you got to work even harder.
All right, it's like no budget, work harder, make a second one. This is all right.
Yeah, this was during the period that Electronic Arts was Electronic Arts eventually lost a class action lawsuit regarding their labor practices and all their forced overtime. And it was a lot of overtime for very little, very few promotions, very poorly compensated. And in the meantime, EA would be bragging about their margins because they're making 97% profit instead of 96. Or it was a terrible time to work for EA.
Maybe comparing just quickly to how it is now, and we probably have to boost. Oh my God, we have to boost our way into the current here. But how would you say? Is it a lot like that that the core? How would you say that? Are there game studios today that are kind of equally creative as they are corporate, or has it become very, very, very corporate in terms of okay, it's the margin on the games that matter, and it's
Yeah, well, this is, I mean, the magic of games is that if it's not creative, it's not really gonna sell because you're not gonna be able to connect with the audience. Yeah. That being said, I think that what's going on now is the industry in general has become very, very corporate, especially with mobile games.
Yeah.
So, in fact, it's so bad. No, I don't want to say it's so bad. But the actual, when you think of a game, when you think of Candy Crush, you think of switching candies on the screen. And you think of that as the game. Well, that game is now called the mini game.
Yeah.
It's not even the game anymore. The game now is the mini game and the meta game. By far, most of the effort goes into the meta game.
Yeah.
Because it's games as a service now. Once you write your game, you continue after launch with a full development team, and you're just constantly improving the game and updating it. And if you don't, you lose users very quickly.
Yeah.
So there's this pressure that comes from the users to constantly keep the games fresh and keep updating them.
Yeah. And so if we take like a super fast segue into now, this was kind of it, but just to kind of reestablish, you moved into mobile gaming and when exactly? And how did that happen?
So after Electronic Arts, I took a break and sort of recovered. And then decided that I wanted to go into... There's this company that I really liked called Play First, and I decided I wanted to work for them because they did casual games. And I learned with The Sims that the female audience was actually a great audience because the games were... I didn't play a lot of games myself. I liked doing things that people had heard of. And casual games were mostly aimed at women. I had some experience with The Sims, which was a pretty heavily women-oriented game. So I ended up at Play First working on, I started off doing a hidden object game. So I went into these casual games. This is, the casual games industry back then was, basically, the customer would pay to download a game. They would pay like $15 or something just to download a file that they would then install, which sounds very palatable, and there was a lot of piracy. But since the games were aimed at such a casual audience, the piracy wasn't really affecting the paying market. So it was actually very, very successful and very, very profitable, and ultimately very influential. But the games tended to be, this is when those games that you see now where you you install a game and then you're like, okay, oh, it's another one of those games where you switch candies. It's another one of those games where you shoot bubbles. You know, it's these puzzle games now seem to come from these early casual games.
Yeah. So they're kind of, in a way, being reinvented now and reused. And this is something I also want to talk a little bit, because we're just on the bridge now of well, I mean, the phone games was actually around here, but we're going to jump right into the iPhone and what happened after that. But it's that kind of revitalization and reinvention of games that came from before, because you basically experienced this wild period when people could make any games, anything went, and from that being consolidating to kind of a few companies and very entrenched kind of market, very hard to enter as a new player, to kind of, in a way, I was reliving that with the phones, because there was a lot of people starting, it was insane. It must have been crazy in the beginning of 2008 to 2009.
Yeah, it's exactly what happened. It was kind of, it kind of happened all over again, where it was suddenly very easy to write and release a game again, and you could write whatever kind of game you wanted, and there would be sort of like you would have an equal chance of success as Electronic Arts, really. And so it doesn't take Electronic Arts to write Doodle Jump.
Yeah, and I think people who are watching, I mean, this is just 10 years ago, you know, and how quickly that market, because I mean, we obviously work in that market, and it's really, really tough. It's incredibly hard now if you're not, I mean, and you know all about that, you know, the optimization and the stuff that is really going on at the top of this game market. But it's incredible how fast they consolidate. If you look at but maybe it is about the same time span. It was about 10 years.
Things happened really quickly back then.
Yeah.
Back then as well. It does seem like approximately the same time span.
So there it is, the secret formula. When we find something new, we have 10 years of craziness where we can just go nuts, but then we have to find the next thing on the next platform or whatever it is. World's platform. Shameless plug. So, good. But I think we can actually, is there something from this period starting there? Would you want to go through it real quick here, starting from the cell phone came out?
Well, I didn't get involved in mobile games again until the iPhone came out. And in the early days, it was very focused on the iPhone. Yeah. You could actually do mobile phone games before that, but they were more for feature phones. And the market was so fragmented that the chances of writing a feature phone game that anybody had heard of was pretty much nil. So it wasn't very, very interesting. But when the iPhone came along, everybody wanted to write games for the iPhone. And then at the same time, we didn't think that the iPhone was going to be a good platform for games. So it's actually we were really surprised that you could actually write such great games for the iPhone.
Yeah, and that happened surprisingly quick, right?
Yeah, it was pretty fast.
Yeah, because I do remember, and this was also in the advent of Facebook, you know, when everyone started having Facebook at the same time. I remember the kind of the conjunction between, like you get all of these games that was developed on Facebook, and you got games that were developed and they were used to spam you with all sorts of shit. It was kind of really annoying, to be honest.
Yes.
But it was an explosion. So maybe we should, do you want to talk about Zynga perhaps, or King? Could we pick what you felt was the most interesting experience there?
We can skip ahead to King, because I think King was the first company that really cracked the mobile game market. Zynga made a lot of money on Facebook games, but ultimately did not translate it all that well to mobile. But King really nailed mobile.
Yeah, exactly. Now I want to say real quick, Andre, hello, man, and good old Farmwell from Robert Mitchell. That's something we...
Good old Farmville.
Farmville, man. I remember
Yeah.
that, and the zombie farm shit that you got like constantly spammed with.
Zombie Farm, okay.
Yeah, something about it's same
Yeah, that was-
concept, but you were apparently
Yeah.
zombies, and that was all new and revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
I was in really aggressive games there. But yes, so how did you get into King, and what happened there?
Well, it's a funny story because I had already lived in Sweden for a year, and then when I moved back to the US, I decided that I wanted to live in Sweden again. I missed Sweden.
Wait, we have to stop there for just a while. What was it about Sweden that you missed? Okay, and apart from obviously maybe family reasons and stuff like that.
No, not
I guess
family
you could-
reasons. I'm actually very
you-
far from my family here.
Yeah,
Which is the biggest problem with
Oh,
living
yeah,
here in
okay.
Sweden.
But yeah. Why Sweden when you could have lived there? What was it kind of that attracted you
I
to
just love
this?
Sweden. I think values.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's nice.
Yeah.
You can work. I think if you can work in the U.S. and make a bunch of money, and then yeah, maybe you can afford to live somewhere nice after.
Good, man. Good. No, but
but
I
so
think a lot of... I mean, I've been living abroad. I'm obviously Swedish, but I've been living abroad for a long time. And I can really appreciate that. And I think a lot of people who are in Sweden, and we're obviously kind of talking about tech in Stockholm and stuff like that on this show, and it's quite amazing what's happening here. But it's really interesting to hear why so many great people actually choose to move to such a cold and kind of inhospitable country to a certain degree.
Uninhabitable.
Uninhabitable country. Why are you
Barely habitable. Well, I have kids. It's a great place to raise kids. Yeah. I like the winter. I was living in California. I'm a snowboarder. I'm not a surfer.
Yeah.
It's living in San Francisco. It's stressful. It's dirty. It's very difficult to get around.
Yeah.
And I find, in Sweden, you have so much more free time.
Yeah.
You definitely make more money in the U.S., but you're much more relaxed, and you just live more in Sweden.
Yeah. You go fika all the time.
Yes.
No problem.
Yes, so it's
Just
coffee
fika.
breaks.
But that's really good to hear. We're actually running out of time. I'm sorry about this. This is why we really need Lee on this show. Lee,
What about all this stuff I prepared?
Yeah, I know. Come back from your special mission. I think what we can do though is that we will continue a little bit over time, because I know specifically we do want to go into some questions that are about the future. I've got really carried away into the past here, because it's I like this stuff. But let's maybe jump straight a little bit into the future. Maybe take that quickly. What happened King and beyond?
So after King, I started my own development studio, Neo Games. I sold the Neo Games to Network, who is the company that developed Legendary, which is a very successful mobile game at the moment, and quite cutting edge and quite well respected. Great company, and so that worked out really well. Network is in San Francisco, so I'm working remotely. But they are a very interesting, very fast-moving, very smart company.
Yeah.
And Legendary is a great game.
And I'm not sure what you can answer or not answer here, but how many people work at Network?
It's less than 100.
Yeah. Because that's a little bit. That's always surprising, because it's not a whole lot of people. I mean, it's a lot of people, but it's not a lot, and they're doing a lot of stuff.
They have a lot going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what less than 100 people can do.
Yeah, it is. When you look at it and the games that they're producing, it's quite cool. Good. So that's kind of where you are today. Mm-hmm. More or less.
Yes, that's where I am.
Yeah, and looking at the future and where we are right now, let's get quickly into the future, and maybe particularly some tips and things that you could say to an aspiring developer that wants to get into the market today. Because again, we're at that kind of saturation point. I mean, how do you get in today? Maybe you want to do your own stuff. You don't want to work, 550 hours a day. every Tuesday, particularly. What advice would you give to someone new?
Well, I come from an engineering background, so I can speak to coders. If there are any future game coders out there, I think I talk to people now that are getting into writing code for games, and it actually seems, for all these great tools that we have out now, it actually seems much more difficult to get started now than it was in the old days where the hardware was very limited. And just having a sprite that you can move around on the screen was a big deal. I think the difference is that nowadays you're constantly having to learn new technologies and new tools and new libraries, whereas back then you had the machine and you had to learn how to get as much as possible out of the machine. And that was fun because you were constantly pushing limitations. So I think my advice to aspiring game coders is to figure out a way, it sounds silly, but figure out a way having to have fun writing code. So I think a lot of aspiring coders think that what they need to do is write a game and release it. So come up with a game idea, figure out how to write the game, and then get it into the App Store. That's not actually the path that I recommend. I would not worry about releasing a game at all. I would worry about just writing the code. And because if you can have fun writing code, it's a win-win situation because writing code is a great job.
Yeah, and to kind of to latch on to that, and so that's kind of probably so basically focusing on coding and enjoying that, not worry too much about all the other parts.
Yes.
Essentially. Because and I think that's really important. It goes actually for a lot of other things as well. I'm horribly bad at it as a generalist. I'm horribly bad. I'm just kind of bad at everything instead of being particularly great at a certain thing. But that's some advice I would also kind of give in music and some other stuff. Focusing on
you want to be a T. A T. Think about the letter T, capital T.
Yeah.
You want to be you want to be broad along the top without a lot of depth, and then you want to have like one area of specialization that goes deep.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that you can, if you look at it that way, I think it's a pretty good model. It's what I look for when I hire people. I like to see some sort of very deep knowledge of at least one thing, and then I like to see that they know that they're also broad, but on a shallower level.
Yeah, that's a really good advice, and it's something we've been talking about before.
The letter
well.
T?
Not the particular letter T, but that's a great. I'm not sure. I'm not actually a letter. I'm just. I don't even know. There's like
kind of circular, huh?
Maybe some form of O. I don't know what I've done, but what have I done? I have to go back and learn coding. Oh my God, so much to do. So, and just really quick before we finish, we're already over time here. Sorry about that, Lee. Don't kill me, please. Don't kill me. Looking at the future of perhaps mobile gaming in front of all, what is it that you see that you think is going to be important, going into the future?
Well, so nowadays I would say the biggest challenge in mobile games is the cost of getting users to play your game. So advertising costs are very, very high. We call it cost per install. You literally have to pay to get people to play your free game. Yeah. And you pay a lot. So on the average, 5 years ago we were paying maybe $1 per install. Nowadays, you could probably expect to pay more like, well, between $2 and $90 per install.
And that's crazy. It's actually quite insane, but it also has to kind of reflect back onto and should tell you how much people are spending on games, which is how much money is actually being spent on free games. Going to be quite intense for that value to be positive, which it has to be, otherwise people wouldn't promote.
It's very, very high. I'd say that I don't know what the top spot in the iOS top grossing chart is worth, but it's on the order of $5 to $10 million per day.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money.
Yeah, so that's how much these games typically make, which is...
well, that's how much the #1 game makes.
Yeah, well, okay,
it trails down, it drops pretty quickly.
This is how much the games typically make. Guys, get into the industry. Yeah, no, it's not easy to come to that top, but it's a ridiculous amount of money. And also an amount of money that has surprised me quite a few times. Again, because it's such kind of casual kind of games that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's incredible how people still get so uncasually addicted to these games and play them so much and with so much passion, at least. So it's a really big number. Great. Maybe just quickly about we have some small notes here. You say loot boxes, right? I know this is a huge controversial topic.
Yes. Well, you were asking what you need to be successful. One of the things is gacha or loot boxes. So randomized purchases is a very big revenue driver.
Yeah.
It's people seem to be willing to pay more for randomized purchases than to just buy something.
So basically, gamble, guys.
Yeah, it's gambling. So people, yeah.
We have it on tape saying that. What can I take you? Take all the games down. No, it's gambling. It's official.
The next thing you need is you need to have events. So events are a huge revenue driver nowadays. So since it's games as a service, you're constantly updating your game to keep it fresh. Your game will actually seem fresher if you're couching your new content as weekly events.
Yeah.
Because then it feels much more time limited, and it feels more important, more active.
Mm.
The next thing you need is guilds. You need to let your users organize into groups somehow. You also need to take your events and you need to tie them to the loot boxes. So the loot boxes need to give you special stuff for that event, which is not that useful after the event.
Mm.
And then ideally, if your events can be guild versus guild, that's also a huge revenue driver.
Mm. And just final thought, Lee, I hear you screaming in my ear right now. What about, how do you see, obviously we are an AR kind of platform, right? So what do you see as probably big opportunities or big challenges that are going to face the AR market, specifically when it comes to mobile and gaming in general? And like possibilities in general for the industry? That's a very big question.
AR and gaming in general.
Yeah.
Let's talk about AR.
Yeah.
I actually did one. I did do an AR game a long time ago, maybe 12 years ago, called Last Call Poker, and it was an AR game set on a poker site. Back then, we would have the game would call your phone and send you faxes and emails and things, and that was the reality part. But I think now augmented reality is going... Augmented reality means that you're bringing the real world into your game. And I think that the big challenge is that it's going to be very, very fragmented. So the different augmented reality hits are going to be very, very different games from the others. In most genres, there tends to be a killer app. So the NES, the killer app was Mario. When the iPhone 2 came out, the killer app was Maps.
Yeah.
There has to be like one app that really makes your platform special. But with these hardware-based AR games, each piece of hardware is kind of its own platform.
Yeah.
So it's going to be difficult in such a fragmented market to get a lot of traction.
It is.
So on the NES you don't have a Mario game to make your platform popular and then make everybody start looking for new games. There's no other. If you're in your case making a ball, your ball is going to have to become popular on its own.
Yeah.
So it's up to you to find your own killer app.
Yeah. So the killer app is a key to kind of open up the market. And you're pointing out another huge thing here, which is compatibility. Like you're essentially, right? I mean, you're going to have a lot of competing players that are developing different things that are on different kind of platforms. So you will need to create a sort of a system that can actually go in many different products and largely have kind of the same, at least the same kind of platform, the same language for a game developer to build upon, so you can actually use more than one object possible in the future. This is kind of what I'm hearing. Maybe I'm wrong there, but at least from our point of view, or from World's point of view, it's nothing undoable in that, even though the ball may be the first thing, creating a good environment to build upon that is stable across different things, that has kind of the same libraries and the same practices, could be something that
and
would
the
be
saves
important.
development costs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, good, man. I'm happy. I got some ideas here. We're gonna go forward internally. No, we have to do this. But yeah, it's been super great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It's been really fun.
About running over the time. I'm also a little bit sorry getting so much into all of these old games, but it's really cool to hear. And I'm 100% sure that a lot of developers who are starting today is interested in hearing, you know, all of this, because you basically have the whole history of what is today, mobile gaming and this sort of casual games that became so huge and is such a revenue driving factor on the market. Very cool. We have a little tradition that we're gonna keep on doing, which is we're gonna press the button here to together, which is it has to be the right button, which is the end button here. Mm-hmm. And before we say that, we're going to say goodbye, and we're going to imagine that Lee is here.
I missed.
Explosion.
Not so good with the buttons.
Buttons. We're going to imagine that Lee is here. Lee goes first, and here we go. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.